Dr. Bibbin.
Sure.
I started the recording, so
Thanks,
just
Aaron.
don't forget.
So no potty language. Okay.
No.
All right. I'll share mine. Thanks for being there. Yeah, maybe I do need an upgrade.
Well, your Zoom needs an upgrade. You don't need an upgrade, Donna.
Well, I don't know. There are days where I think I need an upgrade. But thanks. I think that's it. That is wild.
All right, so are we all ready?
Yeah, sure.
The webinar. It's 11:59.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can start it. Let people in.
So I've sent my slides and I'm going to try to share them. But if we have a problem, we have them somewhere else, right?
Then we'll be okay.
People are coming into the webinar.
So, yeah. Because I should be able to see how many people are kind of going in, joining.
I'm seeing that number.
This
Yeah.
Can you see this now?
Yeah, I can see your title screen. Yeah.
Everybody coming in can
But
hear.
you don't see the top of my screen that says share, stop sharing. I find it's like it was like a floater. Interesting. I might be able to stop sharing, but then, yeah. We're at 143. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give it another minute or two as people start to sign in, and we'll get started in about a minute or two after noon. Here's the chat. We're at 186. I'm going to do one more minute. All right, I think we're going to get going. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our Advancing Authorship webinar, The Impact of AI on the Scholarly Publishing Landscape. As mentioned in our announcement, the release of ChatGPT has certainly generated considerable attention. Those involved with scholarly publishing must be vigilant in understanding and managing AI-powered technologies. Great. Today's speakers are going to help answer many of our questions or perhaps get us thinking of new ones. We have with us today JAMA Editor-in-Chief, Kristen Bibbins-Domingo. And unfortunately, Annette Flanagan has come down with COVID and is not able to share her experience. But Dr. Bibbins-Domingo will be sharing her thoughts about what they have been seeing in the editorial process for JAMA, an international peer-reviewed general medical journal. She will be describing new policies developed around use of large language models in manuscript development and peer review, and will share her thoughts on how these models will continue to shape the future of scholarly publishing. Our other speaker is Phil Watson. And Phil is the course director for the Multi-Institutional Responsible Conduct of Research Program and the associate director in compliance and internal audit at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Phil will be providing his perspective and an organizational view regarding AI and its potential impact on our authors. I'll be adding a link to our chat so you can read a little bit more about the speakers' bios. And I would like to recommend at this time not to wait to send in your questions. Please use the Zoom Q&A feature to do that. Robin O'Hanlon, our Associate Librarian for User Services, will be moderating the Q&A session after the presentations. So finally, I will like to say, and this is really important for us, we will be sending out a survey link after the session and would appreciate if you could take a moment to provide your feedback. So let's get started with our first presentation. Welcome, Dr. Bibin Domingo. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much. I'm really delighted to be here. This is such an important topic, and looking forward both to sharing some of our thoughts from JAMA and the JAMA network, as well as to engaging in the discussion on an important topic that's going to shape all of the way we practice and conduct science and publish, and love to think about it with all of you. So I'm Kirsten Bibbins-Domingo. I'm the editor-in-chief of JAMA and the JAMA network. I'm also on leave as a faculty member where I've been for most of my professional life at the University of California, San Francisco, in the Department of Medicine and Epidemiology and Biostatistics. And I'm presenting my thoughts as well as those of our executive managing editor, Annette Flanagan, who unfortunately has come down with COVID. Just to remind you of what JAMA is, we're a international medical journal. We celebrated our 140th year of publication this year. This gives you a sense of our reach and some of our general stats. We're a part of a network of journals. There are 13 journals in the JAMA network. These include 2 open access journals, JAMA Network Open and JAMA Health Forum, and subspecialty journals. So these 13 journals share the same sets of policies and procedures, the same infrastructure. We're based in Chicago, but we reach quite a broad audience, including specific specialties, in this case, might of interest perhaps to you in oncology. And so some of the policies that we're talking about really apply to how we think about this across all 13 of our journals. I am the editor-in-chief of the entire network, but each journal has their own editor-in-chief and editorial teams, which enable them to make their own decisions for their journals. But again, the policies are the same across all of our journals. So let's just begin and take a step back and think about the types of things that are shaping scholarly publishing and medical publishing in particular. And I would argue that some of these trends that you see on the right side of the screen are those that are challenging all of us. All of us are in an environment where information is common. We're in an environment of information overload. So oftentimes finding what it is that we want to find may be more challenging. We have a crisis of reproducibility even before we had AI on the scene. We're having discussions about misinformation even before the large incremental increase with the introduction of these large language models and advances in generative AI. And this is the environment that all of us in scholarly publishing were thinking about. How do we address these trends? And then, of course, AI came on the scene. And so what I want to do is to place in context the 3 issues that medical journals face, and then talk about how the advent of and the rapidly advancing technologies in artificial intelligence, how they are shaping these issues that have have long faced medical journals. So the first is the need for greater accessibility, for more people to be able to read the type of science that we publish in our journals, and for more to be able to publish in our journals. So the first is accessibility. The second is for you and all of us to be able to trust what you read on the pages of JAMA or any journal that you're picking up. How do you know that you can trust what we publish on our pages? And then the third is the need for scholarly journals to keep pace with areas that are rapidly evolving for the authors that are submitting to the journals and the readers who are reading the journals. So in this case, AI is a technology that changes the way we conduct science, the way we practice medicine. And for us to be a scholarly journal of relevance in this environment, we have to keep pace with those conversations as well. So now I'm going to say these are generic issues that face journals like ours. And what I want to talk about is how AI has really provided us new opportunities and challenges for these issues that we have long faced and have long been discussing. So the first is the need for greater accessibility, both to publish and to read. And I would say this is something that for those of you who are thinking about open access, for those of you who've thought about what preprint servers have done to scholarly publishing, you know that there are many pressures to allow authors to basically put science out there more quickly and more broadly. And I think this is a goal that we all share, even though many of the discussions about the manner in which we achieve these goals of more accessible science are rapidly evolving discussions even before the advent of AI. Just to highlight that a policy that the JAMA network took at the policy change we adopted at the end of last year was to basically embrace the idea of public access to scientific findings. This is a policy that allows any author who publishes within the JAMA network to put the author manuscript of their accepted manuscript on a public repository on the day that we at the JAMA network publish the version of record. This is not the same as putting the version of record in this public repository, but it does mean that an author can deposit this. And so the results of their clinical trial, the effect size from that trial, the methods they use in that trial, that can be made available. The author can make that available on a public repository on the same day, without embargo, that we publish the version of record. This applies to all the scientific content across all the 13 journals of the JAMA network. And we did this because we believe in the importance of making science accessible. And we believe in this evolving discussion and debate of how to best do this, that we want to stand firmly on that principle of making science accessible. And we can do this by adopting this policy. In this editorial, we also acknowledge that the challenge of this evolving landscape and discussions about open access really put into raise several really important issues about accessibility to read, what it costs to publish, and what it means to pass on the cost of publishing to authors. And so what it means when we adopt open access policies that have high author fees, that we might make information more accessible to readers, but in fact, put up barriers to accessibility to publishing. And I bring this to mind because I think we as a journal and a set of journals want to be involved in this evolving landscape and to think about the first principles that guide our own decisions and hopefully be part of the conversation with others about how we best do this. This policy that we adopted is very similar to the draft policy that the NIH posted for public comment in February of this year. And there are lots of discussions, again, about what will be the policy for funders like the NIH for science that they fund. So in the spirit of accessibility, this is how we have thought about what AI will mean for publishing. So let's think about AI and accessibility in publishing. I think there are many opportunities where AI will, in fact, enhance accessibility. One that we see right away, and many have talked about, and we talk about all the time, both when I speak with authors as well as when I speak with other editors of other journals, is that there are many for whom the form in which a JAMA manuscript should arrive to us might be more challenging. Those who are not native English speakers, those who might be early in their career, or in fields where they might be experienced publishing in one field, but the forms in which we tend to have our manuscripts might be very different. And certainly there are many ways in which large language models taking existing text can very quickly and easily adapt that text into something that looks more like a JAMA manuscript, which likely helps when an author submits that manuscript for publication to one of our journals. And I think this is really an important area for enhancing accessibility that might be available with AI. AI also has the potential for making our content that we publish then more accessible in the ways in which we adapt that content to the multiple audiences who read the work that we're publishing. So adapting content to languages other than English will become increasingly easier. Adapting technical content for a lay audience, which we're always trying to do. We are publishing at JAMA and across the network for scientists. We're also publishing for clinicians, and we're publishing for a lay audience. And we want to be able to do that and to provide high quality, accurate scientific content in many modes for dissemination. And these types of tools, I think, will allow us to do this more than we have at present, because these tools are just so easy to use. And then I think with regard to accessibility, these big advances in artificial intelligence will help us in terms of finding content. So right now, we know there's a lot of content that's out there. There are, of course, algorithms that are out there. They don't always help us find exactly what we want. I don't know, some vendors seem to be very good at selling me a new pair of shoes based on the shoes that I already like. It doesn't seem quite as easy to find the next article that I should be reading based on my search patterns. But I think as these tools, models advance, we will be able to see more tailoring of content to a particular reader. Now, of course, as you know, I'm sure many on this call are already familiar with AI, familiar with the challenges of these algorithms, because they're only as good as the data on which they're trained and the ways in which they are tuned. And to the extent we build in the types of biases or our preconceived ideas of what we think someone should be reading, there is the danger of these tools then, segregating the types of scientific content and making it more difficult to find. Those are the types of things we clearly have to guard against, but the potential is clearly there, I think, to make the searches that we have more useful for the reader. Let's talk about trust. How do we know that what we're publishing is something that you can trust as a reader? How do we do that, no matter whether we are a scientist, a clinician, a lay reader? This is, of course, an issue, the issue of misinformation, the issue of trust and the scandals around fraud or carelessness in scientific publication. Those predated AI, and of course, AI has the potential to really amplify this particular issue, which I think is at the root of what journals need to maintain in order to be useful and credible in this environment. So when I think about AI and trust in publishing, I think about several different rapidly evolving areas. The first is that these large language models, the chatbots, and all of their various iterations have been useful for people, and they have used them without oftentimes recognizing the limitations here of the large language models. Large language models, of course, are not search engines, and so when people talk about hallucinations or large language models giving back false information, it's a failure to fully understand what these models are capable of. These models right now are really, they are very sophisticated mathematical models that do fancy autocomplete. And so they, when you ask them to find citations, they of course are not that great at doing that, and in fact are very good at making up citations. So this is an article published in JAMA Ophthalmology, evaluating scientific abstracts and references that were generated by chatbots. And here you're looking at two different versions on the right side of on the left side of the screen using ChatGPT 3.5. And on the right side of the screen, sorry, B, using ChatGPT 4. And ChatGPT 4 is clearly a major improvement because the citations that are in the red box, which are all hallucinated references, ChatGPT 4 has increased the number of hallucinated references for this particular abstract. So very good at generating false references, and that's because these are not search engines. They are not searching PubMed to find a real reference. They are saying, a reference would be good at this point, and a reference might look something like this. And that's in fact what these models are very good at doing, but used inappropriately if somebody who's an author might be using them to generate references or to conduct searches, because that's clearly not an appropriate use at this particular point. There are obviously advances that are happening with large language models tailored to the medical literature, to the scientific literature, but the general models are really not designed for this, and this is clearly a problem. I would say a second evolving area that is posing challenges for us is it involves verifying the authenticity of particular content, let's say an image, attributing that image to the original author of that image, and how one thinks about content that is derived from original content. In some cases, given that these models are learning from information that is out there on the internet, derivative content is going to be common. And the question, and sometimes intended. And the question is how to appropriately acknowledge what is derivative content that's generated using these types of generative AI tools, and how do we verify the authenticity of the original video that might be from, let's say, a patient's echocardiogram, for example. And there are ways in which, through watermarking, other types of things, that this is evolving. But I think the rapid way in which we can create derivative content means that we're always going to be thinking about how to provide the appropriate documentation here and the appropriate cautions for authors as they're seeking to submit various types of content in this regard. The third category is just out and out fraud. So in that paper that I showed you from JAMA Ophthalmology, one thing that the authors note is that if you ask ChatGPT or another large language model to create a data set that has a particular scientific finding with particular confidence intervals and particular statistical characteristics, it is very good at generating that data. And writing a paper on a data that is completely generated would be very difficult for anybody to detect at this point. So if an author was determined to commit fraud, and to use these types of generative AI tools to do it, it would be very difficult, I believe, for anybody really to detect at this particular point. And so let's say, to the extent that there are unscrupulous authors, they now have more tools to do this. Fraud is not unique to AI, but we now have better tools to do this. And I think our ability to detect is probably not really going to keep pace, at least at this point, with our ability to detect this type of fraud. And then the last, which I think is a little bit more of the apocalyptic, at least from a publishing standpoint, is thinking about fraud at scale. So fraudulent manuscripts submitted at a high pace or high rate to journals at scale is something that really has the potential to overwhelm a journal. And I say this as a journal that has very good procedures, very good tools for detecting papers from paper mills, very good tools for detecting many types of ways in which we try to verify the integrity of what's submitted to our journals. But if somebody were out to actually try to really be disruptive to our systems, we would certainly be challenged. And we are, I would say, a large set of journals that have really state-of-the-art technology and procedures. My concern is that these types of threats, were they to come true, would really be very challenging to smaller journals, to journals without the same type of infrastructure. And that's when we think at large as a scientific community about what AI means for publishing. I think we have to acknowledge these types of threats because the big potential with AI is, of course, the potential to scale, whether you're using it for good or for ill. I believe the thing that what will happen over time is that there will be tools to continue to enhance our ability to detect the misuse of these tools used for fraud and other things. But the ability to fully stay ahead will always be challenging. And I think a lot will rely here on really authenticating who an author is, and putting the onus on that author to verify the integrity of what they publish. And that's why I think it's so important for us to be having these types of webinars and discussions, because this is about the integrity of the entire scientific process, whether we are at academic institutions or in the land of journals. Because in the end, it will still be humans, I think, who will have to verify the integrity of what's being published. Even as we have tools to, give us some alerts, this will rely on verifying who is putting their name behind a particular scientific finding, as publishing, frankly, always has been. So let's move to the last area, the need to keep pace with the rapidly evolving issues in science and medicine. This is a nice survey that was published in Nature magazine just this past week. They surveyed 1,600 scientists, some who study AI, some who use AI in research, and some who don't use AI at all, just to get a lay of the land here. And basically, they asked, what do we think the benefits of generative AI are? And you can see some of these we've already discussed, making it easier for those who don't speak English as a first language, or who might be new to publishing scientific articles, making code easier, making it easier to find and summarize other types of research. All of these, I think, are the potential that we have with generative AI. And then, of course, the challenges. And the challenges here have to do with whether we can trust the information that we're going to be reading on the pages. As plagiarism becomes easier, harder to detect, that there will be inaccuracies, the ability to fabricate and falsify, and then some of the things that we've already talked about in terms of biases and what these models are actually trained on. I believe we have to be involved in these types of discussions, all of us, whether we're authors, scientists, librarians, readers, to really understand how these technologies evolve. One of the things we've been doing at JAMA is to have conversations with thought leaders, people who are AI innovators, as well as those who are leaders in science and in medicine, to talk about the impact and to try to demystify some of this and engage more in the discussion. And a recurrent theme I've heard with all of the interviews that I've done so far has been really the need to have more involved in helping to shape how these tools are used, and to understand these tools help shape how they're used, whether it's in the conduct of science, the practice of medicine, or the act of scholarly publishing. These are episodes that drop every Wednesday. We just dropped one this morning, so I'd urge you to check this out and see if it's useful to you, hopefully of interest in this environment. So before I go now into the specific policies, which I will go through quickly that we have at JAMA, I want to say that my view is that AI will change the way we practice medicine, conduct science, teach the next generation, and publish scholarly articles, and that all of us must be involved in shaping how these tools are incorporated into our work. We need more engaged humans to make the best use of these new tools. So let me go quickly then through what our policies are at JAMA. So the issues of authorship, these are the criteria for authorship for the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. Authors have to be involved in, must be involved in the concept, design, or acquisition of the data, and, and must be involved in the drafting of the manuscript or the critical review of the manuscript, must be able to give final approval to the version that is published, and must be in agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work. Those are the criteria for authorships that this international committee, the ICMJE, have set out. And those who do not meet all four criteria should be acknowledged, right? So an author has to meet all four. And the acknowledgements for contributions of non-authors fall into several categories, and I think the ones where large language models assisting in a manuscript that is submitted to our journals would fall clearly in this category. Now, in January of this year, Nature reported that 2 preprints and 2 articles published had already included ChatGPT as a bylined author. And these authors were indexed in PubMed, and certainly very concerning, because this is the first time non-human authors were in fact indexed in PubMed. We published fairly early on. I think we were among the first group of journals to publish on the use of ChatGPT in scientific publication. And this is our editorial we published at the end of January. To give you a sense, I think ChatGPT came out, was released, the first version, at the end of November, or sometime in November. So JAMA's policy on AI, large language models, chatbots, is that these do not qualify for authorship. Only humans can be authors. We took the position that authors can use these tools to assist in the creation of content or in the assist with writing, and that these tools have to be included in the acknowledgement section or in the methods section, depending on the extent or the way in which these tools are used, and that there needs to be adequate description of the content that was created, the name of the language model, the version, the extension, and the prompts, if that's appropriate, depending on how they were actually used. And we are not talking here about basic tools like spell check. We're talking about other ways in which tools might be used to actually generate text or other types of images or data that might be used and included in a manuscript. Again, the authors must take responsibility for the integrity of the content. So it is not enough to say AI, the chatbot hallucinated these citations. The author has to take responsibility. And that's why many of us have been giving these talks, because we believe it's important for authors to really understand that if they use these tools, the limitations of these tools, and that they ultimately are responsible for the integrity of the content that's submitted to us. That is what it means to sign that authorship form. We recognize that that authors are going to continue to push how they use these generative AI tools. And so we've been clear that that for many, the use, recreating materials, reproducing materials, that the use of these generative tools is actually discouraged unless it's part of a formal research design. because we are concerned about the issues of integrity, the issues of image manipulation. But if they are used, again, the author takes responsibility for the integrity of the content that's generated, and we have to be made aware of it in the way that the authors report the scientific finding. I would say this is, we're going to continue to see evolution here. When we came out with our position, there were other journals, notably Science, that was very clear that they initially forbade the use of these types of tools because they've been very concerned about image manipulation. So I think you will continue to see evolution in these areas. But I think ours is a policy that I think reinforces where the responsibility has to lie in an environment where we are rapidly evolving how authors will use these types of tools in the content they generate. There are many who are interested in creating guidelines around the use of AI for research and for analyses. There are some that already exist, and there are many that are in the works and are under development. I would say this is really important because it engages both the academic community, it engages publishers, it engages those who are thinking about what these technologies are capable of. The challenge here, of course, is that the technologies are evolving at such a pace that while these guidelines help journals like ours to make sure that we adopt the appropriate and consistent policies, the technology will itself pose challenges in the pace that it's evolving. The key here for us is transparency and making us aware of what's being used. And so that's where we have really we've really doubled down here on making sure that we are aware, that we're able to communicate that's communicated to other scientists so they are aware. And this gives an idea of the detail that we want to see when an author tells us that they've used some of these tools in the conduct of their science in the manuscript that they've submitted. We, of course, this is a rapidly evolving area, and so we updated our policies just in July of this year, just to be a little bit more specific. And here, one of the areas we newly addressed was the issue of the use of AI tools in peer review. And so here we reported that we now have very specific questions that are questions to authors in the submission process. We're not trying to leave it up to authors to just, remember to acknowledge this. We are trying to be very specific because we think that these tools have the potential to become so pervasive that it's not that authors may not be aware, and so we want to make sure that they don't inadvertently fail to acknowledge something here. So this gives you an idea of the type of logic and questions that happen when an author submits a paper to JAMA or the JAMA network. And again, it is putting the emphasis here on taking responsibility, not that you cannot use these tools, but that you take responsibility for the integrity. That's what's stated throughout all of these multiple questions that authors answer when they submit their manuscript to us. I will note that others have reported the use of chatbots to create peer review. And this is mostly authors taking their own work, putting it into a chatbot, and then seeing and asking the chatbot to create a peer review. And this was reported in Lancet Infectious Diseases. You can see this on social media. There are a lot of people reporting that they generated a peer review on their own work, and some of it was good and some of it not so good. That's what it says in this particular article. I think these types of things are really interesting to us, and they reminded us that we should give our same caution to those who are doing peer review. We have a single anonymized review process. Peer reviewers' identities are kept confidential. The authors' identities are known to the reviewer, and submitted manuscripts are kept confidential until publication. What that means is that if a peer reviewer is taking content and entering it into essentially a large language model, that is in fact a clear violation of our confidentiality policy. That is putting content essentially on the internet, and that's something that we have concerns about. And I have concerns here, not because I think authors, peer reviewers are trying to be fraudulent. I believe that peer review is one of those great services that we all engage in as academics, but is of course the great uncompensated service that we give to our scientific community. And while experienced reviewers know exactly what they need for review, I remain concerned, as somebody who was until just 18 months ago an academic at UCSF, I remain concerned about those who are earlier in their careers, who are asked to peer review, who oftentimes don't know and might feel under pressure to provide certain types of reviews or a certain quantity of reviews, to use these very convenient tools to actually assist them in generating content for a peer review. And of course, doing that in this manner would be a violation, a clear violation of our the confidentiality in our peer review process. So this is what now appears in our peer review forms. Entering any part of a manuscript, abstract, or text into a chatbot or large language model is a violation of our confidentiality agreement. And you can use tools as a resource, but you cannot violate this policy, and this is a clear violation. And so again, we have these forms now. These questions appear on the forms when you're a peer reviewer for us. Let me just say that journals like ours have long used AI-like tools. We use these tools to check for duplicates and highly similar or plagiarized or fake manuscript. We have already been doing this. We check for manuscripts submitted by paper mills. We use them in a variety of different ways to aid in the editorial process so that we can improve discoverability. We use them to find peer reviewers. We use them for other types of format checking or technical detail checking and to validate references. We use them to check image integrity. All of this that we are doing requires human review and oversight. It is important, I think, that we use these tools. We rely on them. It is also important to know, I think, it's important to know that these tools will continue to be adapted over time to keep pace with all of the ways in which AI tools will be adopted for creating manuscripts. I think it will be hard for these tools to always stay ahead. And I think that's why we need policies and procedures that both require human review, human oversight, as well as authors asserting the integrity of the things that they send to us ultimately. So we do not use AI tools to make editorial decisions. We don't use them at all. I know there's much been written about how these tools might help us make better editorial decisions, but this is a very human process. We, in publishing, use AI-like tools to help us to get all of the information we can about a particular manuscript, but we certainly don't use them in making our own editorial decisions. Those are human. These evolving technologies, I think, as I've said before, are going to change many things about what we do, and they will certainly change publishing. They will create efficiencies for authors and editors, and I think will be really important. But they will also challenge us to think through the biases, the ethical issues, and the intellectual property rights of content that will need to be addressed. And we look forward to being part of the process of engaging with the discussions so that we can continue to do the work that we are ultimately doing, providing authors and reviewers with the guidance to maintain the integrity of what we ultimately publish, so that all of the readers who consume the work that's published in the JAMA network have confidence in what we are publishing. So just to end where I started, I believe AI will continue to change the way we practice medicine, conduct science, teach, and publish, and all of us must be involved in shaping how these tools are incorporated into our work. We have to be more engaged so that we can make the best use of these tools. With that, I'm going to stop and turn it over to the next speaker.
Thanks so much. And now we have Phil Watson up from MSK.
Hi, everybody. I'm Phil Watson. I am the Associate Director in the Compliance and Internal Audit at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And I'm also the course director for the Responsible Conduct of Research course, which is composed of our institution, MSK, Weill Cornell Medicine, Rockefeller University, and Hospital for Special Surgery, all on the Upper East Side of New York City. So for my first slide, I just want to give a shout out to the excellent resources that Donna Gibson and her team at the MSK Library have compiled on this subject of AI and authorship. And I believe this is a publicly accessible website. So you will see here that there are many links to other publishers' guidelines in addition to what has been described by the first speaker for JAMA. And you'll have some links to references of PubMed, and there's also some broad issues and articles about the accuracy and concerns of using ChatGPT, many of which have already been described. Next slide, please. So Dr. Bibbins Domingo talked about the use of generative AI for peer review and what that means for their journal. I should point out that if you look at some of the other now journals as well, they have also started describing policies similarly prohibiting AI for peer review. So if you are doing peer review for a journal, it is important to definitely check that. And I put this slide up here because the NIH has definitely become aware of this issue. And they very recently this year in June issued a prohibition on the use of AI for peer review. And it really is about the confidentiality is being breached when a peer reviewer uploads a review, or in this case, a grant application that needs to be reviewed into an AI machine. And it's interesting that in this article that Dr. Lauer and colleagues wrote on the NIH Extramural Nexus article, they asked a well-known AI tool, which was not named specifically, to describe the use of itself in peer review process. And this is a quote that was produced by the AI tool. So if you read that, it's very interesting that this tool basically sells itself and provides all the good aspects of its use in peer review without any of the bad. And clearly the NIH disagrees with this assessment of the tool. And so they have prohibited this for peer review. And they do state in their policy statements that if they do detect that a peer reviewer has used an AI tool to do their peer review of a grant application, they will take serious actions against that peer reviewer, which can include banishment and prevention of any more service on NIH study boards. So in addition to journals, the NIH is aware of this issue as well. Next slide, please. So Kirsten talked about the artificial hallucinations term for the imaginary references. So I wanted to just show this in a little bit more detail from this group that published this year, their assessment of use of ChatGPT in writing scientific content and referencing it. So the authors who were subject matters in this area asked the ChatGPT to provide a summary of the scientific mechanisms for homocysteine-induced osteoporosis. The ChatGPT returned a very well-written summary describing the mechanisms, and the authors, as I said, experts in the subject matter, were quite surprised by how amazing the writing was in describing the scientific content. They immediately recognized two of these mechanisms were well supported in the medical literature. But they homed in on a third mechanism relating to vitamin K, which was not known to them and not known in the medical literature to their knowledge. So they asked ChatGPT to provide a list of the references that supported that mechanism. So ChatGPT provided a response, and when they queried back, can you please provide the references to the papers themselves? ChatGPT says, well, I'm sorry, I cannot provide the links, but here are the references that I used to write this content. So there were 5 references to support this third mechanism. And as Kirsten noted, and the authors went and verified, all of these references from ChatGPT were false. None of these papers existed. What was very disturbing was that ChatGPT came up with real PMID numbers that really link to real papers in PubMed, but that are completely unrelated to these fictional references here. So you can type all of these PMIDs into PubMed and you will find papers. And here is an example of the first one that is highlighted, that it has to do with titanium staples in upper tract reconstructive surgery, which has obviously nothing to do with this queried mechanism. Additionally, if you dig down again on the first example, you see that it was cited Osteoporosis International 2002, October 13th, issue 10. So if you look in PubMed for journals for osteoporosis from that time, that year, that month, that volume, that issue, you will find that it actually does exist. So that highlighted in yellow is a real journal article at a point in time that you can find in PubMed. But what ChatGPT did was it created a fictional title for this. It created a fictional author list, and it created, interestingly, a fictional page range. So the page range that is cited here does not correspond to the page ranges that are listed for this issue. So I think for anyone who is reading science articles, for anyone who's writing this, this should be a very disturbing indication. And when you think about the peer review process, when you read the latest publication in any journal, you have trusted that the peer reviewers have essentially approved the work. But as anyone that has done peer review, is it reasonable that all peer reviewers are going to check the authenticity of every single reference in that document? As standpoint of a peer reviewer and someone who has done peer review, that's very challenging to do when there might be 50 or 60 references listed. So if you look at this list that ChatGPT has displayed, there's nothing that's going to be obvious, certainly to a non-subject matter expert, that these are fictional references. So you, as Kirsten has mentioned, you do want to keep in mind this problem that exists in terms of what ChatGPT does. And ChatGPT and other large language models cannot explain the reasoning as to why they did this. You can't say, why did you come up with that reference and highlight it, because it's not actually a real reference. You're not going to be able to do that. So you are on your own in determining the authenticity of what it provides. Next slide, please. So as I just wanted to give an example of an institutional policy. So as I mentioned, Weill Cornell Medicine here in the Upper East Side of New York, which is part of the larger Cornell University. Cornell University has very, very recently, within like last week, put on their website for everyone to see their policies on the use of generative AI. And it's a long quote, but anyone can go to this website that's listed and they can read it. And Weill Cornell Medicine here in Upper East Side also links to this source from a report on Cornell University's Committee of Generative AI for Education. And you'll see the two big bold headings are accountability and, secondly, confidentiality and privacy. So as Kirsten mentioned, from the journal's perspectives, you as an author are accountable for what you have submitted for publication. It's not a sufficient excuse to say, well, it wasn't my fault, it was ChatGPT that came up with that summary or came up with those references. So you will be held accountable if what you have produced is fabricated or wrong. Secondly, from the standpoint of confidentiality, we've talked about it from the standpoint of peer review, it is a violation of confidentiality to submit an article or a grant application you are reading into a chatbot. But it's also potentially a violation of your institution's policies, their intellectual property, work that is being done in collaboration with companies that are collaborating with the university. So Cornell has listed general broad terms of how you should not be using generative AI tools for research or teaching or presentations that are part of Cornell University. So they also mentioned in this article that they will be coming out with a more finalized policy just at the end of this year. So it is, I would encourage all of you, which are coming from all over the United States and some foreign countries, to look at your institutional policies as well, because I'm sure that all academic centers leadership is very involved in how are they going to grapple with the use of generative AI. And all of them, if they haven't already, will be coming out with policies as well. So you have two levels of policies to know. Your institutions and what they are going to allow, and whether what you're doing is violating their policies and confidentiality or intellectual property. And then secondly, the next safeguard is what your journal is requiring as well. So journal may be allowing you to use AI in a certain way that might be in violation of your institution. So check both levels of that before you start using these tools, and be aware of the caveats and the problems that exist with them currently. Next slide, please. And so I wanted to kind of end with this slide, going back to the NIH statement, specifically talked about peer review, because to this point, the NIH has not explicitly prohibited the use of generative AI in writing grant applications. But they do state in this article that although they do not ask how a grant application, who has actually written the grant, they do say that if you do use an AI tool to help write your application, you do so at your own risk. And that is a direct quote. And the second one is a very cautionary statement that using AI tools may introduce several concerns related to research misconduct, including plagiarized text from someone else's work, fabricated citations we've talked about. And if we identify plagiarized, falsified, or fabricated information in a grant write-up, we will take appropriate actions to address non-compliance. So I bolded the word research misconduct because if you are receiving NIH funds and you have been suspected of carrying out research misconduct by your institution, they will perform their own investigation. And if that institution has determined that you have committed research misconduct, which is specifically defined by plagiarism, falsification, and fabrication, if they believe you have, they will issue findings of their investigation to the Office of Research Integrity, which is under the Department of Health and Human Services. And ORI will then perform their own investigation. So for both written work that is being submitted to journals, but also that is being submitted to the NIH and other public health service agencies for funding, research misconduct findings can have serious consequences for you as an author. And so their NIH is basically getting out ahead and saying, if you use these tools and we find that you've listed fabricated citations, they may consider that you have committed research misconduct, which could start some serious implications for you. So I believe that is my last slide.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bibbins Domingo and Phil. That was so much good information. We have just a few minutes I think we probably have time for just one question. I did want to say that the session is being recorded, and if you registered, you'll receive a link to the recording. And if you have any more burning questions that you have for our speakers, we can be sure to send them along to them, and we will send you their responses. Okay, so I'm going to just take a look at, I see we also have a couple hands raised here. So if you want to quickly put your questions in the chat too, that would be great. We can try and capture those. So I think I'll take this one. The peer review question has been answered. This has been covered a little bit, but just like, do you kind of see a role for replication studies? Dr. Bibbins Domingo, this is something you covered as a way to identify cases of fake studies based on AI generated data. I think that's such an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, let's just acknowledge we've been in an environment of concerns about reproducibility in science even before artificial intelligence, and so I I don't at this point see that that is the solution to helping us figure this out. I imagine that there will be. I have to say, I'm not an AI expert. When I talk to AI experts, I ask, what are the ways in which we can detect deliberately fabricated results using these tools? And I have not heard anyone optimistic that the tools for detection using AI will keep pace with the tools for generating fraudulent information. And so I don't know the answer. I don't know.
Great. What are your thoughts? This is a very, I mean, this is a great question, and there's a lot of that could be said to it. Kind of your thoughts about authors' work becoming part of an AI's learning corpus and sort of all the implications therein.
Oh yeah, that's what I think that is what we're talking about. And I think we can say that, you know, the cautions for peer reviewers that this is a violation of our policy. But what we're really saying is that an author's work before it's published becomes part of the corpus that an AI tool is learning on, right? We will have enough challenges understanding what work that is derivative of work that's out there on the internet that's already published will be, because that's what those models are working on right now. But when we start adding to that corpus the work that is not yet published, it becomes increasingly challenging. And so, yes, how we do that, how we understand what derivative information is that comes from these models based on what they're learning from, it's the challenge. It is precisely the issue.
Great. And I have just one more quick question. I think maybe this could, Phil, maybe you could answer this. So you talked about the NIH. Are you aware of any sort of similar statements or policies from the NSF?
I have not looked at the NSF, but that's a great question, because the NSF recently has expanded the requirements to take RCR courses to faculty and senior personnel effective on proposals that were submitted in July of this year, and that's based on legislation from last year. So that would be, and we've now incorporated this topic in our RCR course, which is currently ongoing, of AI and authorship. So yes, I will actually look into that if NSF has issued any statements.
That's great. Certainly from the NIH at your own risk seems rather ominous. So I'm going to turn it back over to Donna just to wrap up.
Right. Well, I just wanted to thank everyone. Kristen, Phil, you were both wonderful. Please send our, we're very sad that Annette couldn't be here with us, but I think both of you did a great job in explaining AI and your viewpoints, and also maybe generating some more questions for us. So I also want to thank Robin for doing a great job, and Scene. She always does a great job. So thank you so much to everyone. Please send in your questions if you have them. And we'll look to see what we can do to get out the answers, because we do have you registered. Thank you all so much for making this a great session.
Thank you, Donna, for organizing this.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.